Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence Conversation. I'm so delighted tonight to have a true warrior for truth and justice who happens to live on the U.S. Mexico border in a town called Eagle Pass. So welcome Amerika Garcia Grewal. Let me tell you a little bit about Amerika before I turn it over to her. She has a presentation, and I told her, spoon feed us who are, I'm in Tennessee. I have no idea how to get fact from fiction about what's going on, our government, the other government, the state government. And so whatever you can help us with, I'm going to turn the talking stick over to you in just a few minutes. But welcome, Amerika. She grew up in Eagle Pass and has fond memories of canoeing on the Rio Grande with her father, which led to her lifelong love of water and paddling. I wish she could do it now. The 2023 bulldozing of the banks of the Rio Grande and the record-breaking number of people dying while trying to make it to the United States spurred her into action. Her experience living and working around the world, I think latest place you live was Fiji right before this. And she's witnessed different immigration policies and approaches firsthand, and it convinced her that there is a better way to handle border safety than concertina wire. Very dangerous, and buoys. Now she works to spread the message, beginning with her local city council. And she has had successes there, some drawbacks, but we're focusing on hearing from you. Please educate us. Tell us what we can do to support you. And without any further ado, Amerika, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. It's really good to be here. And I'm going to actually go past this screen right here because we are past February the 4th. We had a convoy arrive in Eagle Pass at the same time as the governor of the state of Texas. And it made for some very interesting days that I choose not to relive. Yeah, we had some experiences, which I'll tell you about as we get closer to the end of our session here. So, but first of all, I want you to start out. I want you to say out loud or write this phrase down. I'm somebody. Okay, it's very, very important. You need to have this someplace visible because we need this. I'm somebody. Okay. So I have some alphabet soup that I have to go over first. I want to thank Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church because they helped me come up with this list of acronyms. And if you hear any more in here, drop them into the chat and I'll make a point of commenting on what they mean. So first in here is CBP. That stands for Customs and Border Patrol. You'll often hear me refer to CBP or you'll hear me refer to CBP-1. CBP-1 is a mobile app developed by Customs and Border Patrol, and it's used by people in Mexico to schedule between 1,000 and 1,400 asylum interviews daily. So if people receive one of those 1,000 appointments, they can then leave Mexico, approach the bridge and say, I have an appointment. They can show proof on their mobile app and they're able to enter into the United States for their interview. Interviews are conducted by Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, which is under the auspices of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, DHS is different from DPS. DPS is the Department of Public Safety. And here in Texas, we have DPS state troopers, but we also have Florida State Troopers, they're DPS. You may hear me refer to credible fear. That is the credible fear interview that you have to pass in order to make it through and receive an asylum appointment before a judge. So just because a person is allowed to stay in the United States after their initial screening does not mean that they'll get permanent residency here or anything else. So the phrases you hear about how people are flooding the United States and they're going to be voters, we're talking about a process that may take between 8 and 11 years. So these are not voters for many administrations to come. Yeah. This next slide that I'm about to share you is of me and my father. My father, Mike Garcia, is retired from Eagle Pass. He's the longest serving member of the Eagle Pass Chamber of Commerce. He's a deacon at a church in Uvalde, and education runs in our family. One of my favorite badges says "Danger, Educated Latina." I'm his daughter. I grew up in Eagle Pass, and when I was 16 years old, I went to Germany as an exchange student. I also worked as an international student advisor. Since 2014, I've been working as a consultant in Fiji. So I came back in late 2022. I got off the plane, and next morning I was in the hospital with my mother for her surgery. So the town that I grew up in and the town that I'm currently in as I record this is Eagle Pass, Texas. It has a population just under 30,000 people. It's about 150 miles southwest of San Antonio, Texas. And it is a very poor community. Our per capita income averages $17,000 a year. And we have well over a third of our population receiving electronic benefits, which is higher than the statewide average of about 14%. Maverick County is larger than Eagle Pass, of course. It has a population about 70,000 people. We have 2 international bridges and 1 international railroad bridge. In our district, the Del Rio sector, in 2023, there were 137,000 immigrant encounters, and over 9,000, close to 10,000 of those encounters were the last week of December 2023. Now, when I say encounters, I refer to people who entered the country at a point other than the port of entry. And so this is folks who may have come across the river. You may have heard about the state of Texas putting concertina wire along the border between Texas and New Mexico. It was because there were people who were entering into New Mexico and then walking into the state of Texas. So technically they didn't cross a river, or they didn't cross an international boundary that was a river. They crossed over in desert in El Paso and then came into El Paso. An encounter just refers to somebody who did not come into the United States with authorization or through a port of entry. In contrast, the international bridges here in Eagle Pass had over 8 million people who crossed the bridges. This is vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, everything else. So in terms of the total number of entries into the country, the migrant encounters are actually a very small number. Our sister city of Piedras Negras truly is a sister city. You can see it in this picture here on the left-hand side. Their community goes straight up to the banks of the river, and then you can see directly along the river, there's what's called a linear park. And it's a beautiful Paseo del Rio, and you'll see people often walking along that with baby carriages, jogging, fishing, and on the United States side, that is currently a mess of concertina wire and shipping containers. But Piedras Negras is a beautiful city, about 300,000 people to our less than 30,000 people. And medical tourism is a really big thing, but they also have a number of forms of industry, which my hometown of Eagle Pass does not have. There have been a number of approaches to immigration over the year. In this picture in the lower left-hand corner, I'd like you to see it says Eagle Pass in 1914. The bridge that is now the railroad bridge at one point in time was simply a bridge connecting 2 points. So think about this bridge next time you drive around town. What would it be like if you suddenly had an international boundary over that river, over the Nolichucky, for example? So that's what it's like to suddenly declare that this is an international boundary, as we did in 2001, and start declaring passports, start requiring passports of everyone. Passports are currently running over $100. If you have to have speed processing, that number can easily double. And so if you have a family that you want to take to go visit grandma on the other side of the border, what used to cost you just $5, actually used to cost $1 to cross the border. And you go see grandma, you come back, you're gone, you're just driving across town, really. Now that can have wait times of up to 16 hours, and every single person in the family must have a passport. So it's really changed the interaction between the two different cities on different sides of the border. You may have heard the phrase open border. The phrase open border really did not come into use until the Obama administration. And it's a racist term that was used kind of as a spillover by folks who were unhappy with the Obama administration. The racism came out in a number of comments about him, his wife, his administration, but also about the border itself. Another failed policy that we had in 2017 was the child separation policy. And in 2019, there was an attempted expansion of the border wall by the Trump administration. We also saw the implementation of the Remain in Mexico protocols. So, for example, the CBP One app is an example of that, where you have to stay in Mexico until you have an appointment. Only then are you able to come into the United States. We also are seeing expedited removal, where instead of having the chance to go in front of an immigration judge, people are simply removed from the country. We're seeing the refugee caps dropped. And during the Trump years, we also saw active duty and National Guard deployed to the border. Now I'm going to show you two other photos here. The photo in the center is from one of our border vigils, and it is an 18-foot tall metal fence that is at the edge of the River Vega, the edge of the river flat. That was put up during, that's 2008. That was also put up during the Obama administration. It's more of a fence than it is a wall. And then the photo in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a shipping container in the top corner, and you'll also see concertina wire. This event right here is one of our border vigils, and that's Pastor Leva reading some Bible verses in between our song of service. So these are past approaches, some of which have come into the United States, have come into our practice today. So Operation Lone Star came into effect in March of 2021. To date, $10.5 billion has been spent on that. An additional $2.5 billion has been authorized by the state of Texas. And it leads to this horrible mess that you see behind the photo, which is the concertina wire. To date, 91 miles of the river is about 1,250 river miles. About 91 miles of it now has just so much concertina wire all through it. You'll also notice in the photo that on the far right side, it's vegetated, but where the concertina wire, there's no vegetation. And that's because these areas have been scraped with a bulldozer. In the cases where there were islands in the middle of the river, the state of Texas has taken heavy equipment, heavy machinery, and simply pushed the entire island up to the United States side of the river with no accommodation, no adjustment made for any kind of migratory waterfowl or animals who might be living in the river. There are 15 states that are supporting this with their money, their personnel, and their equipment. These include Texas, of course, but also Arkansas, Florida, Idaho, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. And it's really horrible. We have thousands of containers and 1,000 feet of buoys in our river. Prior to 2024, the state of Texas was filing criminal trespass on private property with the authorization of the property owner. However, this year, coming shortly actually, Senate Bill 4 will come into effect, and Senate Bill 4 says that anybody who enters into the state of Texas at a point other than a port of entry, so for example, the International Airport in San Antonio, the International Bridge in Eagle Pass, the International Bridge, the International Port of Houston, any of those kinds of places, if you enter at someplace other than a port of entry, then you can be charged with criminal trespass into the United States. The first case is a misdemeanor, and the second case is a felony. The state of Texas has also responded to the influx of people into the state of Texas by busing and flying migrants to blue cities. And in December of 18th, additional laws were signed which will criminalize migrants. There is a very large dollar cost to this, and the deterrence policy is not working. We've had our highest number of people coming into the state of Texas during the years in which Operation Lone Star was in effect. So it's a waste of money, but it has a very severe cost to the people involved here. So for example, families who are coming up from Venezuela generally spend over 2 months, sometimes 3 months, sometimes longer on the road between their home country and arriving in the United States. The time that they spend on the road, they have an increased risk of extortion, kidnapping, and assault. Many of the women who enter the United States have been assaulted from where they left their home country and to entering into the United States. One of the reasons that people do not wait for a CBP 1 asylum appointment is because they are being extorted for funds or because they feel their family is at risk of kidnapping or assault. The deterrence policy that the state of Texas has in place is leading to increased deaths and injuries. So for example, the photograph I'm taking here, the temperature is about 115 degrees, and we see cases of heat stroke. We also see cases of drowning. You'll notice the woman in the black and white Argyle sweater, just how tired she was. We learned later that she had been on the river since before 6 a.m. It came over before the sun came up, and at the time of this photo, they'd been on the river for over 6 hours. And it's not just straight walking down the river, the 4 miles to this particular point. It is walking up the bank, trying to find a spot to get into the United States, walking back down the bank, slipping and sliding, and having to deal with that concertina wire every single step of the way. And so what will happen is people will become ill because of the heat, because of the sheer exhaustion of everything that they've been doing, and they'll slip and fall and be caught by the current and drown. Or you'll notice the gentleman with the black shirt and the yellow stripes, he has a child attached to him. And what will happen is he and the child are at risk of drowning, or a child that he might be escorting um, might slip and fall. And in attempting to try and save that child, all of the children and the parent end up perishing. This is the case in January 12th, 2024, where there were two adults and 4 children attempting to cross the river, and one child got away, and next thing, the mother and the other child were lost as well. So the human costs, travel and waiting, increased deaths and injuries. We have family separation. In this particular photo that I took myself, the family with the 2 younger children had gotten further ahead, had fallen behind. The youngest boy was with the young man who's on the right-hand side, and the young man was able to make it up to where we were beaching the boats, and the concertina wire was closed after he got onto land. And the father came up and he's like, "That's my son, give me back my son." So of course the other young man brought the son over to hand him back. But this shouldn't have to happen. It should have been that if a child is already on land, we're going to let the whole family be on land. And indeed that was the case. An attorney came in and said, you have to let them on land. This particular family was not charged with trespass, but many families are charged with trespass, which is criminalization of the most vulnerable. And I consider it to be legal extortion, because once they enter into the legal, it's criminal industrial complex, prison industrial complex. Generally, people who have the ankle monitors are the ones paying for it. And once you're in prison, every single thing that you do costs money. If you want to speak to a loved one, that costs money. Postage costs money. Everything costs money. And it's very hard to do. So those who have the absolute least have to pay the most of this process. And it's a horrible process. The people who have to administer it are experiencing suicide rates much, much higher than national norms. And anything that we can do to stop it would be good. My hometown, my community of Eagle Pass, has some financial costs that we're experiencing as well as the weight on the heart that you have. 55% of my community's revenue comes from bridge tolls, and the businesses downtown tell us that 30% of their revenue comes from the bridges as well. So every day that the bridge is closed, they lose 30% of their profits. We have personnel from 15 states here in Eagle Pass. In addition, we have thousands of officers who've been deployed to the border. Well, you can't rent a house here for love or money, because everything has been bought out by investors who are increasing Airbnbs. So our cost of living here in Eagle Pass is higher than it is in other towns like San Antonio, Laredo, because we have this increased pressure on it. I hear a lot of people talking about, well, yes, my family are immigrants, but they came to the United States, quote unquote, the right way. And that kind of a phrase forces mixed families into the shadows. And people don't step forward to take advantage of benefits that they are entitled to, not just eligible for, but entitled to, which increases poverty, increases isolation, increases additional problems. Our clergy are also speaking about the loss of religious freedom. In addition to us not being able to hold our religious services in Shelby Park, the clergy and congregations cannot minister to the body and the soul the way they have for years in the past, because the actions that they've done in the past. So, for example, a church van taking kids to Vacation Bible School, those kind of things are now illegal. And we really have a divided community, with Border Patrol and law enforcement not mingling with the regular community. They have low church attendance rates and low involvement in many of the different activities of daily life. Now, I have an asterisk in here, and that was because we've had a number of Christian nationalist militias who've come to the border. And on Saturday of this past week, our police department was completely overwhelmed. They had calls from department stores, from grocery stores, from downtown, just from all over, saying, there are people walking around with weapons, exposed weapons, are walking around. It's intimidating. It was scary for the community. I was told that we had 8 arrests over the weekend. And in Tennessee, you also had an arrest of a sniper who had body armor and had a number of different things. He had the means, he had the motive, and if he had made it down to Eagle Pass, he'd have had the opportunity to cause death and destruction. And so these are costs that no community should have to bear, and we really hate it that our community is having to deal with this. So it's a lot. It is a lot for us to deal with. And so one of the things that we did starting in August of 2023 is we started a community care ritual. It's the Border Vigil. It was a response to the first 2 bodies that were caught in the buoy barrier. And we've been holding it monthly on the boat ramp of Shelby Park. This is the same park that we are completely locked out of. But we have successfully fought and advocated for access to that ramp. And every month it's a little bit iffy, but every month they have let us go in. Now, in December, we didn't actually have a vigil. Instead, we erected a cross memorial. We put up 700 crosses for the estimated dead on our border. That is an estimate. Customs and Border Patrol has not, they haven't gotten an official number in the last 2 years. And so we had to do this based on things like missing migrant reports and such. That 700 also did not include the 74 that were injured and killed in high-speed vehicle chases. Operation Lone Star is leading to over-policing of our border, and 68% of the high-speed chases that occurred in Texas occurred on the border. But you can see in the photo here the cross memorial that we had. We did have a surge at the end of December, which led to a lot of what we're experiencing right now with the militarization of Shelby Park. It was over 1,000 people, over 10,000 people in the 2 weeks at the end of the year. They were mostly Venezuelan, and all available Homeland Security personnel were deployed to the border. Our emergency room, there's so many people who had injuries. Our emergency room was experiencing wait times of over 12 hours. And the railroad bridge was completely shut down. One of the bridges was pedestrian only, and the remaining bridge had a single lane of traffic bringing people into the community. And it was over 13 hours to leave Mexico, and we had people that died while they were on the bridge. So, I mean, there's a very human cost to the changes we have, to this deterrence policy that we have going on here. And then in January, the state of Texas seized the city park and completely barred federal authorities from entering the park. And the instant that I saw what was going on, I wrote in and I said, people are going to die. Like people will die because of this policy, because that river is so deadly. And with the federal authorities having to enter from 6 miles upriver or from 8 miles downriver and then motor back up, there's no way they can reach people in distress in a quick time. And I made that comment on January the 11th, and the very next day we learned that a mother and her children had drowned outside the gates of the Shelby Park boat ramp. We were initially told that we could not enter the park and we would not be able to have our cross memorial closing service. But the night before it was supposed to begin, I did get information from the Texas Military Department that we would be allowed to enter it. We had to sign in. It was under heavy guard, and at various points during our closing service, we had people come up to us and kind of look at what they were doing. But we did have the service. A scant 4 days later, we thought things were quieting down, and I got a call from a reporter saying, I don't know if you saw this, but on January 6th, there was a call for convoys to come to Eagle Pass and take back the border. And we went, you've got to be kidding me. So I'll tell you a bit about that in a second there. The state of Texas has been sued at the Supreme Court, saying that that the federal administration should have access to the bridge, should have access to Shelby Park, and the Supreme Court has upheld the federal government in their actions. And the state of Texas has said that they are completely going to ignore that, and that the federal government has broken its compact. So we're in a very interesting time period where we're seeing that diplomatic actions are having more of an effect on the number of people entering our country. And yet the state of Texas is doubling down on aggression, and they're doubling down on concertina wire. So I don't know yet what's going to happen there. But what I do know is I know that it's not really about immigration. I've been told a couple of things that really resonate with me. One of them is that the problem is more valuable than a solution. So, for example, we have a number of senators who came forward. They proposed a plan where our conservative politicians got everything that they asked for. And less than 3 hours after presenting the plan, Mitch McConnell said he would not vote for his very own plan. So, and it's because a solution, you have to stop talking about it. You put an idea forward, you voted on it, okay, it's over, it's done. But when it's open, people complain. And so we as Americans have to go and say, first of all, show me why this is a problem. Now, fix it. Stop talking about it. Fix it. You have a headache, go take some medication. You broke your arm, put it in a sling. We've identified the problem. We know how to fix it. Let's fix it. So it's not really about immigration. What it's really about is federal versus state power. And the lines between federal versus state power are what determine if the Center for Disease Control can shut down businesses to keep us healthy. If the Centers for Disease Control can require that you wear a mask in your home state. It also decides whether a governor can say that certain medical procedures are illegal, and the president can say medicines can still be delivered through the federal mail. So those are a couple of the areas. We also see it in the Electoral College Compact that 16 of our states have entered into. And so this delineation between federal and state power could have an effect on who is president at the end of 2024. One of the things that's very concerning to me is that we are seeing abuses of international law. We're seeing outright abuses of human rights and civil rights. And there should be more outrage. You'll hear people talk and jump up and down and foam at the mouth about their Second Amendment rights. But here we have international law, we have human rights, we have our First Amendment rights, we have our 14th Amendment rights that are just being trampled on. And yet, where is the outrage? Where is the concern? So that really bothers me. One of the things that we're also seeing is we're criminalizing race and poverty. There's no such thing as a rich, I'm going to use this phrase, illegal immigrant. We call those guys investors. The people that we're seeing coming in have nothing. They are trying to survive. And yet their very action of trying to survive is being criminalized. We're doing this with homeless statutes all over the United States. So I guess it's not really a surprise that we're doing it to other countries as well. Some of the laws that are coming into place, for example, SB 4, which is the human smuggling law, it will mostly apply to U.S. citizens between the ages of 17 and 26. And Texas is a majority minority state. So we don't have a single majority. Texas is a minority majority state. We don't have a single majority group. Instead, we have a minority group that is larger than others, but still no one of them is more than 50%. We have growing amounts of familial wealth, and we have growing voter numbers. And so rather than address the fact that demographics in Texas are changing and trying to bring up a new crop of Latino leaders, equally dispersed among all the parties, we have one party that is trying to disenfranchise folks from certain backgrounds as fast as they can in as many ways as they can. The other thing that was really interesting, I got to meet with a Polish humanitarian aid worker, and he said that in Poland, they brought in about 2.6% of their overall population in Ukraine refugees. So they brought in 1 million Ukrainian refugees. And he said it was fine. They were welcome. We did our best to help them. And we quickly did the numbers here and stuff. We are bringing in less than that percentage of people into the United States, and yet we're having all kinds of problems here in the United States accommodating that number. And the reason is because our safety net is brittle. We have cracks in our country. If we were healthy and whole, these numbers would not be any problem to us. But we're having issues already. And so that's why we're feeling the strain, because we have larger problems. This just happens to be where we're noticing it. For example, you could think of it as the dye. When you go to your dentist, you see all kinds of things you didn't want to see. It's not the dye, it's the problem that the dye illuminates here. I really want people to understand that this is just the first wave of what is going to be the largest movement of people on our planet that humanity has ever experienced. We talk about Ice Age and how people moved all over the planet. We have more people on our planet than we've ever had before. And we're going to see this increase in numbers as climate change intensifies. The other thing is, in the United States, we need people. We already have worker shortages due to low birth rates, high retirement rates, skill mismatches, and because of immigration restrictions, we can't just hire from abroad the way we have in generations past. So that comes to the question, what can I do? And you'll remember at the very beginning, I went to you and I said, somebody ought to do something. I'm somebody. This is your moment right here to remember that I'm somebody. The first thing you have to do is you have to decide to take action. Okay. You must say, I'm not going to sit and watch this happen. I'm going to do something. That's the very first step there. Things that you can do, you can work on educating yourself, come into sessions like this, and learning more about the history and diversity of immigration and religion in the United States. Not everything here has to do with race and ethnicity. Sometimes it has to do with religion. We talk about think globally, act locally. You have immigrants in your community. I guarantee you have them. If you don't see them, you're not looking hard enough. You have immigrants in your community. Go find out where they are. Find out what's going on. The other thing too is that this is an expression of hate. This is an expression of racism. So one of the things that you can do that will be helpful just across the board is speak out and take action against hate and violence in your community and online. And the other thing is, you may not know what to do, but I bet you've got friends. I bet you've got partners. I bet your church is in coalition with other churches that have partnerships, and you can show up to support your partners because somebody's got to do something, and I'm somebody. Well, we meet on the first Monday of every month, about 30 minutes before sunset, and we would love to work with you if you want to have a vigil in your community, and you can acknowledge climate change. You can acknowledge racism, incidents of racism and hate in your community. You can do what your community needs in your community, and we would love to mark that. We'd love to share that with you. You're welcome to reach out to us. I encourage you to find our Facebook page. We're on Facebook at Border Vigil. We're also just a phone call or an email away. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Amerika. That was fantastic. You've educated so many people here today that have no idea what's going on there, have so many questions, and I'm glad that you have invited others to contact you to be able to support you there, as well as to support people in our own communities. It's you are compassion in action, and I honor you. And I'm wondering, how is the mental health of your compatriots on this side? And I can only imagine, the devastation of the people who are so desperate, who are basically fleeing South America, where our country has not. How do I say this? We're part of the problem. We've started the problem of why people need to leave, in my opinion. If you look at John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where he kind of talks about how our behavior in South America and what we've done to the cultures and to the economies there. And then we're surprised. And so if you want to just speak to some of those topics, I'd appreciate that.
I'm writing down Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yes,
Economic.
He's actually
that sounds
an
interesting.
updated version up. That
good.
was his job. He was hired by the U.S. government and go have a nice conversation with the newly elected leader. And all of a sudden, they're not representing the people. Guess who they're representing? So I won't tell his story, but it's traumatic read. And he is now a shaman and is very active in the one of the co-founders of Pachamama Alliance. which is in
Wow. Yeah.
165 countries with over 5,000 volunteers, trying to wake people up to, to what we've done, and to environmental issues, to climate issues, and to just consciousness in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll turn the talking stick back over to you, Amerika.
So I dropped a link in the chat. It's also on the Facebook page. When I was talking about the cost to people, I mentioned this 2023 Dutch TV section. We took a 6-minute video that Dutch TV did, and we edited it down to about 45 seconds, highlighting the physical issues that people were experiencing crossing the concertina wire. And the young lady, the volunteer who did the editing for us, is like, I am not all right, you know. So yeah, it is really hard. I'm very thankful that we've got some really wonderful people here with us, and we are working really closely and supporting each other. We're also encouraging each other to, eat right, get some sleep, get your exercise, and so on. But I will tell you that I'm at least 20 pounds heavier than I was this time a year ago, and I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and we're sitting there talking, and my blood pressure just shot up, and the doctor's like, we're not going to record this one. She's like, but you need to watch your stress. So it is definitely having a physical impact on the people who live here, the chronic stress that we're under. And the thing is that there are pills that will make me feel better, but to a certain extent, feeling this awful is a normal, natural reaction to something so unnatural. And so I do need to be more careful with my health, because if I'm a vegetable, I can't help anybody. But at the same time, the fact that I feel something, I can feel so strongly, I actually am glad about, because the situation is so bad. And if I were passive around it, I would be concerned about myself. But yes, yeah, mental health is definitely a very important issue.
I know that there are some bodies are listening to this, and what would some bodies? I know you talked about some things that we could do. Do you have a coalition or organization that people can donate to, or tell us more about how some that even just spreading the word. That's why I heard you talk at our Unitarian church this past week, and I said, I don't know, I've got to send this message out to as many people as I can, because that's kind of, I call myself a blabbermouth for good. So some might disagree with that, but my heart just is, having, 2 foster daughters that walked across they snuck across the border from Honduras, and they, now are U.S. citizens, and that was quite a while ago. I can't even imagine what it will be like now. But this is truly is close to my heart, and I know there's others that are watching that would love to know how to connect with you, and also what other needs that you have.
Well, I've dropped some things in the chat, and you also have this via email. Financial support for our church's admissions would be absolutely amazing. Their doors are open more hours, and they're hosting more activities these days, and they've done so without complaint. I mean, they've even offered their premises, but there is an actual tangible financial cost to having the lights on, having the heat on this time of year. So I have a Cash App here for Iglesia San Lucas, which is just $ Iglesia San Lucas. And then for Mission Border Hope, I have a PayPal. And as I get more links from these different organizations, I will definitely send them to you. So that's one thing that could be really helpful to us. But one of the things that we really need is we need you to speak up. We need you to work with your faith communities. If you see a pickup truck that has an American flag and it has a cross wrapped in it, well, my God does not know any borders. I don't know. I can't really see Jesus being an American, considering where he was born. And our faith leaders need to say, wait a second, I have this happening in my congregation. I need to do something. And so if you're in a congregation where this is present, you need to back your pastor up if they go and they address it. Faith doesn't hate, and anyone who calls himself a Christian nationalist or showing themselves to be a Christian nationalist needs to be addressed directly. And it's important that all organized religions challenge these narratives and ideologies that lead to hate and lead to violence. And we've got to show a way forward that is peaceful, and that values coexistence, because we're fixed to be the endangered species. You know, I've lived through 200-year storms that happen within 5 years of each other, and I gotta say, we don't have anything that compares with Mother Nature, and we need to be taking this very, very seriously. The way, you know, we weak, hairless creatures have been able to survive to where we are now is because we work with each other, we collaborate with each other, we watch out for each other. You know, I find people who can't wake up in the morning and they apologize because they're such night owls. I'm like, hey, people like you are the reason humanity survived. You watched the fires in the middle of the night so we were not eaten by wolves. You know, like we need all kinds of people. And I don't know if it's our money or if it's our size or what it is that's insulated us, but we need all kinds of people because it is our diversity that makes us stronger. So that's just so incredibly important. Um,
Absolutely. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So, well, I got lots to say. Careful what you ask me. But along that, I talk about different personality types, but also different faith types. So, for example, if you were to see something that was concerning you about, for example, a Jesus Christ Church of Latter-day Saints, do you know anybody in the church that you could go to and say, I'm worried? You know, who do you talk to? Who do you connect with? And you need to make sure that you have that connection. So in the case of an emergency, you have the understanding, you have the trust. One of the fellows who participated in our events this weekend, you know, and in the face of drawn weapons and everything else, was a pastor. And the reason that I answered his phone call and spoke to him was because he was introduced to me from another pastor. But that happened when things were quieter. If it had happened in the moment, I don't know that I would have answered the phone. So you need to build those trust networks right now, and you need to have those connections now when it's quiet, because you'll need them down the road. The other thing is, I've spoken at several churches right now, and a lot of folks have white hair like me, sometimes more white hair than I do. I'm not seeing youth. I do see women, but I'm not seeing youth. And so I'm going to ask you, how are you engaging your youth in this work? Because I mean, they're going to inherit this planet. They need to be, you know, working on these skills, learning how to have difficult conversations, knowing how to respond to conflict and everything. So that's just so incredibly important, you know, right now. And my last ask is that you take a look at yourself. You asked me how mental health was doing here. I'm going to ask you, are you ready for trauma? So, for example, when we left Tennessee, when we left HVUC in 2008, um, there was a shoot. There was a shooting in 2008 in Tennessee at a Unitarian church, and Holston Valley Unitarian Church immediately opened its doors and offered a lot of resources to our sister congregation that was hurting. We were able to because we had the resources, we were ready, we had a plan. Many churches in the United States now have response plans in case of that sort of thing. Um, I need you to take that plan out. I need you to dust it off. I need you to take a look at the people who are listed in that plan. Are they in physical condition that's good enough to handle these kind of stresses? Are they in a mental condition that's good enough? COVID took a toll on every one of us, and we've got to go back and see, are we ready to deal with trauma and adversity? Get yourself to a good place now, or work on getting yourself to a good place, because it's just going to get worse in the days ahead. So, but that's kind of all I have to say.
It's just it's wisdom. It's wisdom. And your question, are you prepared for trauma? And, you know, it's 2024 is just forecasted. We're in a period of great change and uncertainty, and on so many levels, in so many avenues. You mentioned, you know, climate and um, you know, the mental health of our youth. I'm very concerned
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a good question. Where are the youth That's a question I have at about everything I go to. And, the some that will talk to us is that they feel traumatized already, just getting out of bed. But, with what's coming at us. And there was something else I wanted to ask you.
Mhm.
You have needs for food, for school supplies, or anything functional like that?
No,
Or?
most of the migrants who come into Eagle Pass, they're here for a day, maybe 3 days at the most, and then they move on. So we do have needs for not really consumables, but socks, especially for children, underwear for children, and also for warm clothing this time of year. We also need socks for adults, and we need socks and underwear for adults as well. Mm. Those are not things that do well when they're donated. The other thing is that many of the people who are coming here have been on the road for an extended time period, and they tend to be a lot smaller than most Americans. So the donations in children's sizes and in adult, small, medium are very much appreciated. I listed 2 churches there, but if you'll collect them at your church, you could just actually. One of the best things is to go to Mission Border Hope, and they have an Amazon store. Just purchase their wish list off the Amazon store and have it shipped directly to Mission Border Hope. And that way you don't have to worry about it being shipped to you and then sent down to another place.
That's
Yeah,
great tip. Okay, I did not know that.
yeah,
Well, I do want to bring up today there was the Senate, the
yes.
immigration bill. I think it didn't pass. It was came out. This is going to be voting on this bipartisan law. And can you update us on what happened there?
No, I can't.
Okay.
I have not been able to check in on the news to see exactly what's going on here. So I do know that the bill was basically dead on arrival. But there are a number of problems with the bill. And I'm concerned. I believe that the aid specifically for Ukraine by itself did not pass. And
Okay.
I have a great concern for that because if Ukraine falls, it's basically going to be a sign to the rest of the world that might makes right. If we see Russia gobble up Ukraine, we're going to see all kinds of larger countries gobbling up their neighbors, and even places that are not their neighbors. And ironically, Governor Abbott says he's trying to do this to lower the number of immigrants coming to the United States, and yet his actions may actually increase the number of war refugees that we have in the world. So I have a lot of concern about the Ukrainian aid. So there are other issues that I have. The bill is poised to make permanent and harmful changes to immigration policy in the United States to virtually eliminate ways to apply for asylum and also take away some of the international protections that we've had for generations. That is the next presentation we have here.
Okay. I
So,
know.
um, just because we're probably going to see aspects of this bill come through again, even though this died, the fact is it has the details, it has the numbers, it has everything that our conservative politicians were asking for. So we're going to see it again. Unfortunately, it may be too late for Ukraine when we see it again.
Well, I know that I've taken up a lot of your time, very precious time. I really appreciate your sharing everything with
Of
us.
course.
I know there's a lot more, but I just want to close and say that regardless, somebody, what you do, just remember that prayer has no borders, love has no borders.
Yes.
And when we keep that light in our heart and share that, however that looks, we are helping. So I just implore you to connect with Amerika. What is the best email for you, Amerika? Just
For
bordervigil at
yes,
gmail.com.
bordervigil@gmail.com is probably the best way to reach me right now. It's certainly
Okay.
the easiest email address out there.
Here's just what to remember. Well, thank you
Yes.
so, so much. And
Mhm.
I will keep in touch with you. I know you have the governor coming down again this Thursday. We just send prayers, light, love, and as Marianne Williamson says, meditate in the morning and kick ash in the afternoon. So,
God has no hands in the world but ours. So, yes, absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Good night.